Despite my best efforts in trying to make videos for new players to ease them into the game, to get them playing, that kind of thing, you'll see that the majority of my content has been squarely aimed at the competitive audience. It seems that as many casual videos as I can do, the bulk of my viewership always seems to come from anything where I talk about, oh, this is the best warband, or this is the worst warband, or here's how to play this warband competitively. It's kind of a fact of life that even casual players will be interested in the competitive side of the game, and that's the kind of content that they seem to consume. You just need to look at my channel stats, see what videos have the most views, and you can kind of get that information for yourself. I try to stay away from giving advice to people that goes generally along the lines of, okay, you should not play this warband because. And instead, the kind of content that I try and make is geared towards people who do want to play these kinds of warbands and how to make the best warband and the best efforts that you can with the tools that you have at your disposal. But all of this has kind of got me thinking, why are some warbands bad? Is it because they're actually bad and they're actually unplayable, and if you bring them, you're basically going to have a bad time? Or is it because we, as members of the community, make our judgment, and then that puts off people from playing those warbands in the first place, which is a bit of a travesty. So that's the thing that I'm going to be talking about today. I've got Rob over again onto the channel. We're going to have a bit of a discussion about it. But before we get into that, of course, as always, if you want to see more content like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You can join me here on YouTube as a member. You can join me over on Patreon. You can join me over on Streamlabs. Either way, you'll get to see content before it comes out, and you'll be able to see some behind the scenes action into what I've been doing and how I've been doing it. Rob, thank you very much for coming back to have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I'm excited.
It's good to have you back. Always a pleasure. So, you know a little bit about why we're going to talk. I did an article. Guys at home, you can find that up here. There's the link for you, so you can go check that out. But basically, my stance on this topic is that, all right, let's get the elephant out of the elephant in the room. Let's get that out of the way. There are 100% fighters and warbands that are just better than others. That's undeniable. You can't say there aren't. Statistically, numerically, their abilities, whatever you want to say, they're just better. But that doesn't mean, though, is that warbands that can't necessarily fight them on the same level that they're playing, so top tier competitive play, that those warbands basically can't be played, or that they shouldn't be played, or that there's no reason to look into those warbands and kind of put in the time to see how they play them. Just before we start, I want to give a little bit of my background into this and why I'm thinking this way. So I started years and years ago, right? 25 years ago, I started playing. And back then, internet was in its infancy. And essentially, if you wanted a good list, you had to figure it out yourself. And I feel like back in the day, there was a lot more experimentation in the tournament scene, because I was still pretty hardcore into the Warhammer tournament scene back then. And I feel like you got a lot more people looking into the different kinds of models that you can bring and building army lists in such a way that those lists were more personal to themselves, because the only way to get a good list is to pick a list and to practice with it and to say, right, this is good, this is bad, and you work your way through. And I feel like nowadays, you've got the internet, you got Discord, you got Reddit, you got whatever, you got people like me who spout things on YouTube. And it's very much a shortcut to that endpoint. But I do wonder that people such as myself and your guys as well, there's only a limited amount of things that we can test, and there's only a limited amount of time that we have in the day to do our playing and do our testing. So I wonder if we're basically missing something. And if a warband comes out, I think Pyregeists are a really good example of this. The community has kind of looked at Pyregeists and said, okay, their gimmick doesn't work, so they're kind of bad. But I know that you were really excited about Pyregeists and getting them up and running and doing that kind of thing. And what I don't want ultimately is for someone who likes the look of Pyregeists to come and say, oh, XYZ said they're bad, their thing doesn't work, so I'm just not going to bother anymore. I'm not going to collect them. If this is my way into Warcry, then why should I bother with this game? Because the thing that I like isn't good, so why should I play it if I'm not going to win any games. And ultimately, regardless if we're casual or we're competitive, you want to win games, right? You're playing a tabletop war game at the end of the day. So that's where I'm
That's
coming.
something. It's just human nature to be competitive no matter what. Like there are people who are just if you're sitting down at night with your boys or with your significant other or your might be, you're just there to throw dice, right? You're there to have a good time sometimes, but nobody wants to do something that performs so bad that the time and money they invested feels like a poor return when they put it onto the field. You mentioned before that when you first started wargaming a million years ago that
Yeah.
you were that I have to. I'm like, how old are you? Like 25 years ago. I was like, damn, dude, I couldn't afford anything. This is the first time I could afford it in my life when I got like a career. It reminded me of back when I was in high school and
Hmm.
World of Warcraft came out. The internet was still in the Wild West days, right? Like when it was like shock sites and like all the crazy things. And one of the things was you had no guides telling you how to build talents. You had no guides telling you how to do boss fights. You had no YouTube breakdown structures.
Hmm.
So the acquisition of information was very limited, and same thing especially probably even more so much for a tabletop game that wasn't in the mainstream or in the main light of the media as it is now. So we have the ability, like back then it was the ability to just like talk, get to know, try a couple things out. People were really proud of their like little units, so the power level was probably very like unrefined, unclean, and it was just you just do what you wanted to do and you figure it out from there. And then we have now we where we're at is we have this like super high pace internet. We're all in a Discord. We all can combine minds. We can get to the information and crack the code faster. You see it in card games like Magic the Gathering
Hmm.
when it was just local game store heroes. And now it's like meta list. Like this is what this is for best of two on MTGA. You have Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Yu-Gi-Oh has its own tier list. Like people crack it, and I don't even know how people could crack that because you have to play 10 hours of solitaire. Wild. You have all these games, right? Hearthstone, right? Like people figure out, like it used to be like when it first came out, like, oh man, this is really fun. These are some cool decks. Now it's like within half a week, it's like these are going to be the best top performing decks. Like, and you see things trickle along. Where I'm getting at with this is we get information so fast, but we're also so quick to write off our own ability to find and figure things out. So we rely on people who do the reps or the people who play, a certain amount of games per week or day, people that are grinding tournaments. You're like, okay, well, I'm just going to trust them. They know what they're talking about, and we move on. And when we do these things, we lack the ability to be able to assess and do things for ourselves and find creative solutions. Now, I think it's a little bit tougher with wargaming because you're restricted to what you have and what another person has in a table, and you're meeting up and it's like X hours out of the day. Whereas in a card game, you could bang out like, X amount of games per hour online or at a card store. It's just a lot easier. So we have ways to figure in, like, look at this. You're talking about the Pyre guys, and you look at them and mathematically, like, you could tell something was tuned down from them, whatever it might be, whatever their passive was made smaller, was made to be something weaker. Like they just feel like a worse version of themselves. And people writing them off like, you know what? It's not giving me the stats I want. I'm not getting the abilities I want. It's garbage. It's unplayable. And I think we run into a problem there when we say something's unplayable. And I think the general term for what something unplayable might be it's just like hyperbole, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not as effective as a top tier team. If you love the way they look with them, and I will tell you from somebody who's gone through like 10K worth of armies that they will never play, just turn around, painted, shipped, and sold them because I didn't like the way they played, or I didn't like, or they played well and I didn't like the way they looked, and I was just chasing top table because let's be honest with ourselves. Most of us aren't going to GTs and playing at top tables. Most of us are just going to our store and then playing some tables there. We're playing with our friends in our kitchen or garage or basement or wherever it might be, game room. And we get caught up in chasing that. Like, this has got to be the best thing. Like, we know this, and we have data to check it out. Like, we have math, right? Like, this is what a great unit is. This is what a not great unit looks like. It doesn't mean at the end of the day that the dice you roll are going to be perfect, right? It just means on average, it's going to have an easier time surviving, killing, doing whatever it might be to be more efficient. But like if somebody's coming in, they look at the fire and flood box and they're like, oh my God, these fantasy Harlequin looking elves, and these super ghost boys that it's basically Harlequins versus Necrons and that. Yeah, right. But way different, but basically the same. And it's cool, dude. If you want to pick it up. Like be aware that yeah, it's not like top tier, but also be honest with yourself. are you trying to be number one in one of the two major tournaments per year in America, or are you trying to have a good time and actually enjoy it? Everything is viable. You can play Canaanite Shadowstalkers, play Daughter of Cain. They got some great heroes. You might not be happy with their chaff, but if your friend's playing whatever they want to play and you're playing whatever, you're gonna have a good time because it's a good game. And we can't dismiss it though. We shouldn't dismiss them as something that's like terrible. Even yeah, they are mechanically lesser than stats don't line up as well. But to get back to the point of like you going to the tournaments in 90s, like we stopped caring about figuring things out for ourselves and figuring out tech pieces and just taking what's in front of us because we have information that's easy to access. So as gamers, it's a little bit more sluggish on our parts that we're just saying, hey, you know, this guy says it's good, let's take it. And then when you start getting different opinions, like this is good, but, or this is good, but it forces the person to start having a dialogue with themselves. Like, well, what can I do? And I told you this, right? Like when I first started my Warcry career, I listened to the Salty Sea and I listened to you guy and you, Eitan, exclusively. And I saw you guys had two different ways of analyzing and playing. And then I said, hey, let's build up from there and form my own opinion rather than just going out and buying a box because I learned my lesson of buying 3K of Stormcast and then like I loved painting them, but I hated playing them. Let me go and not get another Auric army that I don't want to play that I just built and painted. Like stuff like that and then figuring it out and going from there. So I mean that's just my tidbit of information on it, especially the
Mhm.
whole like I do kind of miss those simple days, right? Like the
Yeah,
nostalgia of like we don't know. It's a whole unknown world and now it's solved in like a month. And
sure.
I don't think it's solved. I still don't think. I think we know the best outliers of things and we know the worst outliers of things, but I still think there's so much room for experimentation in tech and you're still going to see things hit top tables at tournaments because yeah, duh, they're good, right? Especially if somebody figures out the secret sauce to a Daughters of Cain unit that goes in with River Blades and River Blades runs and pings, and all of a sudden they got a fast hero that's now 5/5/2/5 and runs 6, reaches out 8. Like,
Yep,
oh, nobody saw that coming, right? But
exactly.
they're not gonna do it if all they're doing is taking at face value. I can only play XYZ because it's good.
Yes, 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 yes. Going back to what I was saying, it felt like if I went to an event, like back in the day, and like I'm a million years old now, it
I
would
am too.
be,
Don't feel bad.
yeah, like I could play 6 games over a weekend, and I could be surprised at what my opponents were bringing every single game because it's like, okay, well, in my little bubble in my local game store, there'd be like 5, 6 of us. We can't test everything. So it'd be like, oh, wow, I've never seen this before. This is really cool. Or I got punked by Immortal Wave Serpents. I never played that before because I don't have an Eldar player locally, right? And that's what I kind of feel is a little bit missing nowadays when you do go to these events. I think to be honest, I think there's a difference between what we have here in the UK and what there seems to be going on. I don't want to make sweeping generalizations, but I'm going to. Seems to be going on elsewhere, like in Europe and in the States. It feels like when I go to Warhammer World events, you can see it, right? I've done numerous videos on what wins and what doesn't win. And you very rarely see the kind of cookie cutter, Formoid Crusher, Varangard, a whole bunch of chaff Warbands actually winning at those events. Now, I don't know
Right.
if that's because locally we just like to play whatever we like to play. And I mean, there's player skill is still a massive component of this game. And I feel like a good player can take basically anything to an event and still expect to go like top 8 or something if the event is big enough. But yeah, I don't know if it's just a cultural thing where we just want to play whatever we like and we're going to go and we're going to make it the best that we can make it. Or maybe we're not as competitively minded or whatever. But yeah, that's the kind of thing I see over here versus what I see elsewhere. And it's kind of a puzzle that I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out still at the moment.
I think that's a good insight, right? Like you mentioned a couple things that are really good there that I want to touch on. Like one, player skill is always a factor. I'm 100% confident with the amount of reps that I have. I could
Mm,
play a turd sandwich and still do really well with it, right?
yeah,
But that's because I play, I research, I know what I'm doing, I know what my opponent's doing. There's no way to measure player skill in terms of like finding something consistent. Like I know a lot of guys that placed like, like look at Adam yesterday placing
fifth with Fire Slayers.
with
Adam is
fire
War Games on Toast. He did real
or
well at
flame.
Warhammer World.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
War Game Toasty
Toast.
placing with VFS, right? Vulcan Flame
Flame
Seekers,
Seekers,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, they're all the same. Naked dwarf boys, right? Or slightly more charred naked dwarf boys with scales. They're cool. They're cooler. They're way cooler. He's just a good pilot, and he's playing with 7 models and like a big threat piece. He's knows what he's doing. You had Thylax, right? Who you had on your show take Warrior Chamber built correctly. It was a blind tournament, but it ended up being a smash pack, and he had the pieces for it. But again, a good pilot knowing what he's doing. We have a guy right now in our league who's tied for first with another 3H1C member,
Mm.
Tough Tootin' Baby Kit, is playing like Kagra and playing like Slaves to Darkness and just dominating people with it month after month now because he gave up his Legionnaires, but he keeps the Curie because he's a man.
Sure.
But that's player skill, but there's no way to measure that, right? Like other than seeing somebody consistently place. Now, the one thing that you said is like it's a cultural difference, right? You have that store in Nottingham, which I'm sure is sweet. And when I'm coming over the pond next year, I'm 100% going there. I'm like, yeah, babe, there's estates in Nottingham. I don't know if there is. I completely don't know. I just know I'm going to that store and that's going to
Sure.
happen. Right, but I'll pay the price for it, I'm sure. But like it's fine. It looks like a lovely town though. But you have access to like a broader audience of the way it broadcasts. So it's like it's a lot more mainstream there too. The companies from the UK, you have people that are going to go. They're like, yeah, they're totally having this at Warhammer Worlds, just a couple more casual. Over here, like at least from my experience, I have to scrape to get like 10 plus players at a tournament, and most of those players are one from our league, two are people that we've played before in other big tournaments,
Mhm.
three know what they're signing up for. So there's no easy access to a GW store or like a well promoted tournament. I know in the Midwest, with all them out there, they have a lot more of a scene or a bigger scene that's a little bit more developed than ours on the East Coast. So I say Midwest for anybody in Europe, Midwest like Wisconsin and Michigan and the Minnesota and all those areas where it's like negative 70 degrees all the time and super big. It's crazy. Going out there for a DevCon was very cool. But you see that. So I think the culture difference is like we have to like fight to get these tournaments in, so we're making the most of it, and we're building the most for it because it's like we only get one game maybe once every couple months, and we have to make sure that we're doing the best. It could just be the straight up competitive factors of it, and maybe you guys have a little bit. It doesn't make either or lesser better. It makes it very different. I know the Spanish players in Spain for Kill Team are bananas good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're
Saying
hardcore.
people are saying, those in Poland just look at what's at top, take the top, apply it, and then just go hard and play that. Like that's their power level of gaming. And that's sick too. And it might just very well be a big cultural difference. I do think, and I think the tournament yesterday had Horns place first and had Soul Blight in like 2 spots. It had a little bit more of your regular people, but with any big tournament, there's variability, there's easier and harder paths to the top. So you still had Stormcast, right? You had Thunderstrike up in third. You had Cruel Boys up there. You had like a whole bunch of variety of things. And it was really cool to see that. But you still had the slottings of like good things because who knew that flame hurlers are good? It's a surprise ending for everybody
Sure.
when you could just burn through armor, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And I think that's like a really cool thing you brought up, the cultural differences of it and like and playing that. It gets out of hand when people start playing for a while, like the conversation in Discord was we're in the Wild West over here. And you just have more frequent large tournaments. I don't see smaller tournaments come out. I bet if you saw like a lot of smaller tournaments, you'd probably see a lot more either one crazy lists and two more sweat lists because it's people like working intimately with that time as opposed to let's just show up,
Yeah.
grab a couple pints, roll some dice, have some fun. I got this one box of things. And that's awesome, dude. That's what the game was like originally designed for, was to have that quick skirmish thing. And we as gamers just made it elevated. And don't get me wrong, I think it's awesome that you guys have had crazy wins, right? But as we talked about before, it's about its ability to replicate those wins. We had
Mm.
Dark Oath take it with a very good pilot who's in our league, and I've played against some very intelligent player, was playing Dark Oath with a FOMO or Dark Oath with the Varangard.
Sure.
And although you guys don't have the cookie cutter same as lists, it's still where I think Poland had like something crazy like 6 FOMOs or 8 Varangards or something wild like that, which was like awesome in Warcry, but which is interesting because that means it's a lot of chaos out there and not a lot of death, order, or destruction. That's a whole nother tangent though. Sorry, I get like excited off the of people's different
The
preferences.
tournament results. Yeah.
Yeah, the tournament results are very interesting to me across there. And like you guys having such broad diversity is really cool and it's healthy for the game. And I think people need to also learn that like it's a big tournament. Like you're gonna have crazy results. And now if you're having like crazy results, take a look at the whole year, right? Like you had one time where it was Cypher Lords in third, and then you
Yeah,
had Dark Oath in first, and then another time you had
I
Warrior
made.
Chamber in second, and you had Questers and Warrior Chamber, right? Now if you look at like over the course of a year and it's like we're just having crazy results all the time, then it's like, yeah, dude, it's just take your best 6-shooter and go to town and just try to see what you could do. And I think that's sick. I mean, obviously you bring something that's a little bit geared or tuned, you're gonna have a better time or probably an easier time, but it doesn't mean it's a clear short shot to victory. Your dice could fail you. You don't know how to pilot a good list. There's a million other things. Because I'm going to take the better pilot over someone with a better list who's never piloted it before. There's a lot there to it, and I think it's awesome. And I think that you guys like keep. I want to see what's the next one. June you have
June, yeah, June 30th.
June 30th. You're going to that one?
Yeah, I'm going to that one. Yes.
Sick. Right. So I want to see another wild sort of variance. Horns taking first. About time. You just had 2 or 3 tournaments in a row where it was just like random thing at the wall, right? And that's cool though. Like it's not bad by any means. That's awesome. I love seeing stuff like that. Where if you looked at Adepticon and it was like KO, Monster Killers, Soul Blight, COS, Soul Blight, like there was the only smatterings in the top 4 that were like random were my team. Like we had a Gits player, me a COS, Soul Blight with Kyle, but playing a unique list.
It was all the main characters.
Yeah, dude. So like that was wild. And like, but now people are taking these things and saying like, you know what? I know people said this is not good, but one of the top lists was running 2 Black Knights. How many times have people written off garbage unit? I'm not using it. I'm only going to take what's the best unit possible. But when this guy's just throwing cavalry at you using triples, expending, keeping everything locked in and playing a whole new style, like you said, not being surprised anymore. Well, the person who's able to surprise you in this game has a super big advantage for 4 rounds and limited activation. So now take what you can do, take the good pieces and make different builds with it. There's nothing final about this. So anyone sitting here going like it's solved, I don't think it is. I do think it's heavily figured out. We identified correct pieces. We've identified bad pieces. I played Domiton. That is not a good piece in like 90% of lists.
Hey, Domiton single-handedly won your game for you when we last played.
Yeah, man. But that's the thing, though. That's the thinking of it. Like I have a Hail Mary play to get back into it with a quad that is got to be a high quad. And then I have to roll dice to roll dice. Like it's not reliable. But hell, if it works, it works. Same thing with putting the Flameseeker as an ally. But why would I take a 150-point Flameseeker when I could take an Annie Prime? Well, Annie Prime's not burning somebody out, burning a FOMO out for 12 damage and then swinging for 14 more. Like we're like there, you have to think creatively, and that's how you're going to stay on top of it. If people want to spam Varangard, put some nets in there. Put some high toughness things that negate his ability. Play Seraphon. You want to come in? Throw it. 2 of your hits or crits. I still have 12 to 16 life. Okay, I'm done. Disengage. You could do it again next turn. You better have a triple if you want to get that kill, and I'm still going to try to stay alive. Like there are ways to think about it, but because like you said, there's no surprise. People are telling us what how to play, or not how to play, but the most effective way to play, which is completely correct statistically most of the time. It's up to the player to now think around it. Like, how am I going to get around it? So if there's a lot of shooting, what are we going to do? You can build towards KO.
Yeah.
KO is broken AF, and I'm so happy it's not at your tournaments. You know, be thankful because it is a miserable play experience. Sky Pirate Communist or not Capitalist Dwarfs, complete opposite there. So super duper cool looking dudes. Fight for Profit's a really cool idea. They got some cannons and stuff. Really great. You want to play it, put it on the table, looks good. But having 50-point shaft that are that good are freaking broken, man.
Yes.
And so like it's efficient, right? And I know some people are experimenting with playing different styles of it, like no cannon, and hats off, super hats off. Find it. Find the non most efficient path and win with it. Like that's sick, right? That's piloting.
What is it? Skypikes, right? Skypikes are fantastic.
They're sweet as hell, man. Yeah, dude. They're just as good as 100-point Trog Slayers with spears from Wildercore.
But they're like 70 points.
And they're like 70, 75 points, right? And then like you throw a Calthea in there, you're cooking. Like,
Mm.
let's go. Right? You like you and I know a player out in the Midwest. We're playing a player who's playing with Slon for a while. He
Yeah.
doesn't play on TTS that much. He doesn't, like it's not as broadcasted. And then you put him in TTS, and now I'm starting to see Slons pop up everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're
I don't know whose fault that
right.
was.
Remember when we had Nova, and I was like, I'm going to make Hrothgorn. Like,
Mm.
everybody wants to play movement 3. They're being told to play movement 3. Move on 3
Yeah,
inches to me, please.
exactly.
Take the shot. So
Yeah.
it's about thinking, and that's about reading. And there are certain things, like if you think you're going to play a all in-house, non-underworlds, non-Achillean King IDK list, have fun if that's what your passion is, but be
Mm.
realistic. You're most likely going to get thumped because everything is just crazy priced, low wounds, low top. Like, it's statistically and mechanically not strong. Is it
Yeah.
viable? Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
man.
mean, there are ways you could, like there are ways you can make it better, right? But you've got to,
Right.
I think being realistic is a big part of it, right? Like the eels themselves, sure, they're not going to stand up to like a hero hitting them. They'll fall over. They're fast. They can hold up entire deployment zones worth of fighters.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I think that's it, right? Use them in a different way instead of expecting all the fighters to kind of do the same kind of thing. That's one of the biggest problems I hear about, like the elf chaff specifically, right? 65 points, blah, 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 8 wounds, toughness 3. But what have they got going for them? They're fast. Okay, that's not terrible. So why are you trying to run them into combat like they're some kind of Bestigor or something? That's not what they're there for. They're there to do something else. And in Daughters of Cain, for example, they have stuff that can fight. You bring a Medusa, you bring a Gorgai. It'll rip anything you want, but don't expect your elves to do it. And I think that's it, right? Kind of tempering your expectations as to what you think fighters should do and what they shouldn't do. There are going to be better fighters. Yes, there's going to be stuff that's better than them, but in reality, if you want to go like 3-1 at an event, you could do that with Daughters of Cain. If you really wanted to, you could do that.
100%.
Sure.
You're going to need a little bit of luck. You're going to need some good pairings, because if your Daughter of Cain just show up against like a really tuned Soulblight list or a really tuned Horns list or really tuned...
We're talking about if you're at that level and you're playing at that level, your Daughters of Cain list is going to be tuned itself, right? It's not just going to be a bunch of models that you threw together.
And that's where the talk of like, it's viable, but you're going to need a hell of a lot more luck and good rolls than the other side that has more forgiving, because their 50-point chaff have 12 wounds.
Yes.
You can no minimum range point blank shoot you where you can't counter it.
Sure.
And that's where like it's a broken piece. Like, we can acknowledge that.
We know it's strong.
Like, you can absolutely do it. It's going to take a lot of legwork. It's going to take a lot of knowledge. You can't just plug it into a smash pack and be like, yeah, here we go. You got to figure out like what you're going to do. But I think that's like, we get to the point of like, you have to build. We should be teaching how to build with creativity.
Yes.
And teaching how to evaluate things with more than just point efficiency. I think personally, we're in an era coming out, and you can look at it. If I may plug myself here, 3 Heroes, 1 Chef, my team have, by the time this is out, the video will already be released, but check us out, please. We're going to discuss and cover, I think it's 2 hours of all 6 of the new Underworld Warbands. All 4 of us.
Nice. I'm going to put link up there. You guys want to watch it?
Love it.
You can go watch it. There we go.
Thank you. 2 hours, good podcast. Listen, I get a Charlie horse in the middle, and I knock my camera off. I'm always messing up somehow in my streams. And we have a big time death player with us, and he rambles on for like a couple minutes about death. But if you like death, he's the boy to listen to. He's a great listen to. Right. But the point being is like, we're seeing all these abilities go up in power, not so much stats. We know what point efficient stats are, but we're seeing crazy strong abilities come in. In the case of Zandara's, it's both, but it's Soulblight life, right? They're just eating well no matter where they go. It's interesting though, because now we're seeing better abilities where you look at IDK and you're like, they have some good situational abilities, but then a new IDK warband comes out, takes some of those situation abilities, and then gets their own. And they're like, hey, you can plug us in as a tech piece for there's monsters. I'm going to hammer tide it. And for those who don't know what it is, draw a line to the corner. Anything it hits, they can't fly, jump, or climb.
Yeah, start crawling on the ground.
So maybe you hit a chimera and all of a sudden they can't climb over things. They have to walk around stuff. They're limited in their activation and it takes burn damage. Like,
yes,
it's a cool tech piece. It's playable, what are you playing and what pack are you playing in? And we need to start teaching these things. There is a lot of weight in abilities, and it depends on how you build. I'd agree with the fact that a lot of wins are founded in, or advantages. I'm not going to say wins, but advantages found in list building.
Yes.
And if we're not teaching the people how to creatively build towards a pack, and we're just saying plug this in no matter what, it's strong, sure. But the person who's slightly ahead of you and being like, okay, well, I expect to see these 3 big guys or these 4 big guys, demons, KO, soul blight, horns, right?
Yeah,
We're gonna
some
see these
variation.
guys.
Yeah.
How can I handle them? With what pieces can I handle them? What are my good matchups for these missions? But nobody's the higher level players are obviously are saying that. But anybody who's just like, I want to go grab a beer and have some fun with my friends are not obviously thinking that. And this is like the people that it applies to of like, I just want to go with my Daughters of Cain and show up and have a good time. And just play a bunch of things I like. Do that. Do that. Have fun. Throw your dice, make friends, have a good time, enjoy it. But the realism of what you can replicate if it's not tuned, and if you're not a known player, like also be aware of that too.
Yes.
But like if you want the Pyre Geist and the there's some good things to take from there. Not a lot in terms of like high power competitive play, but if you want flame ghosts and Harlequin elves, get them. Get them. Build
Sure.
them. Have your buddy run 1 box against 1 box, you're gonna have a blast. You want to show up to a tournament and say I'm gonna get my teeth kicked in and then learn what I gotta do? Do it. Learn it. Because you're gonna be a better player if you're putting the reps in on that and then figuring out what you need to ally in. You just have to ask yourself what your goal is, and then how many times have you played this to understand what it is. If you're just opening a 1 box and showing up, it's going to be really hard no matter what you're playing.
Yeah.
Like
sure.
you could play KMK, and like if you're doing that, you're gonna have a bad time because you're gonna be like, well, what do my abilities do? What do you do? And then like you're sitting there in decision paralysis, and you're just getting like somebody like throwing dice at you, and you're like, well, what do I do now? Like, so okay, you took a good warband, you don't know what to do with it. It's still a problem, but that's also like experienced player skill. It's a different issue.
Yeah.
So.
And I want to just touch on something, just give an example for that, right? Because you said that, well, I mean, you said, and we've said on the Discord, it's been all over the place, right? Shooting meta is apparently back in. We're going to shoot things, they're all going to die. Maybe I was a mistake taking a slan and advertising that I was going to take a slan. Who knows? You got Pock, he's shooting things, all that kind of stuff is happening, right? So I think that there's a lot of talk about that being a problem, and that's a problem, right? So I was going to take the slan to June, but then I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do that because what do people bring? They're still going to bring Fulminary Crushers. They're still going to bring like these big power pieces that can like roll in and kill you. There are a whole load of really cool tech characters with really good support abilities that no one takes. So I thought, okay, how can I make these, but without them getting rolled over? And I was looking at Skaven for this, right? Skaven have Storm Vermin. Storm Vermin have the Bodyguard special rule, which means that it's an ability. On a double, you can't target heroes within 1 inch. I haven't seen anybody going hard on Storm Vermin to protect these big techie heroes before. And I've been testing it, double True Blood, you put Skabic in there, bunch of Storm Vermin, and it works out really, really great because suddenly these big power pieces can't hurt you. And shooting, the secret sauce to shooting in Warcry, by the way, is get a strength 4 fighter with shooting that's decent, give it strength 5 thanks to Divine Blessings. Suddenly they're wounding most things on 3s. Storm Vermin have toughness 5. You're shooting over a piece of terrain, they go up to toughness 6. All that shooting goes into the toilet because suddenly they can't kill 10 wound Storm Vermin, and then you've got all of these abilities to protect your really cool, like, techie characters. And yeah, I've kind of hard pivoted to that because that's where I see people playing. But all I really see, most of the Skaven chatter is, oh yeah, Skaven basically have one list. It's Storm Fiends or it's Rat Ogres with a Master Molder pushing them up the board. If I wasn't looking for an answer to a specific problem, in this case, shooting and super big power pieces, I wouldn't have even looked at it. So yeah, I think taking what you want to take or building for specific things, and then of course getting the practice in and then list building properly around that goes a very, very long way to basically getting wins in there, almost regardless of what faction that you're going to be taking. Whether your guys are good on paper or they are bad on paper, Storm Vermin are inefficient. We know this. Their points cost is really high for what they're bringing to the board. But the fact that they have that ability and they've got the stats that I want, as opposed to the stats that the numbers say that I should care about, is really worth something. And that's just like my example of what you're saying. List build to what you want your warband to do and what you think you're going to face. And then, despite all of that, you can still make what people see as bad fighters into very useful fighters. The end.
Yeah, it's playing to your strengths, right? Like it's not without inherent weaknesses.
Sure.
It's not without its faults or problem in a list itself. It's about how you play and pivot off of it. And you can have one, and the cool part about teching, right, is like your ability to read the room and the meta, and you can have an amazing time, right? An amazing time. You can do a great job of being like, I'm going to tech for this, right? And then never comes up. My Donison, I didn't face one horde. I was like, well, okay, not a problem. Like, I'm just gonna have to rely on the other boys. And then this guy just wizard shoot stuff. You can go against that and find no shooting against you. Currently, what is it? I mean, if you really want a hard counter shooting, you would go into like a COS line.
Oh,
But
sure.
the Storm Vermin saying you can't target is good. It's a tempo play. So like you're doing like, I need a double. I'm positioning within you with an inch. I'm gonna sit and wait. We're gonna develop and then scurry once you get close. It's pretty smart. It's cool. It's 80 points. Like I look at it and you're like, well, an Ardboy is 80 points or 5 more wounds
Yeah.
just outright. But like that's not the purpose of an Ardboy, right? Like Ardboy is to get in and get dug in quick, right? Yeah, dude, it's about list building and teching, and sometimes you get tech completely wrong. You can get a completely
sure.
wrong read on the room, but that's going to be experience and the ability to, what am I going to get? Am I building a take all comers list? Am I building a specialized list? And they're just playing from there. But these things are not commonly taught as frequently as I would like to see. And that's what, my team 3 Heroes, 1 Chef, 3H1C like to do is like have this conversation of, well, how do you do deployments? How do you do this? We're not teaching those things. We're just teaching like right now the access and focus is on math. And that's completely good too, because he gives us the information we need to work with. So when I say like, hey, right now, the most common thing I'm going to see is this, then in my head, the gears turn and I go, okay, well, how am I going to counter it? What pieces am I going to put in? Right? I played the Cavalier Field Marshal in COS because if I go against any shooting, I'm going to free 9 inches with the flag and I'm flying in there, tying everybody up. T5, 26 wounds. You're spending time disengaging or you're sitting there shooting. And if you want to scatter, you're just disengaging and then moving. And I'm still having free reign in your back line. So take your choice of what you want, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out that way. I could do that and they could just roll 6s and I disappear and my genius plan is for nothing. That's a complete realistic thing. Your Storm Vermin can roll up and you're like bodyguard, and then someone's like 6/6, and you're just like, it's dead, right? Like
exactly.
It's part of the game, and that's why we can only go so much off of it. Because at the end of the day, if you're getting diced, you're getting diced.
Yeah.
Like there's no plan stops a crit unless you have a reaction assist, turn crits and hits. And even then, if the damage is too high, you're still gonna die. Getting a read on the meta, like teaching that is important, but that also coincides with the other stuff of like what is the most efficient, right? Like that kind of dictates the pace of the meta, but we should be like helping people figure out it's not solved. It's good pieces known, good warbands known, good lists known, but there's still always improvement and unique things coming in. And I think like because we're stuck here waiting for an update or for like a points adjustment, it's up to us to be like, well, let's play around with stuff that we don't know. And if it does bad, so what? Cool. It does bad. If you'll never know if you don't try it. You can take a good read on it. Pyregeists are really hard to play, but the 130-point Balefire Guard on the double, making an ally or a hero T5, T6 seems pretty good. Getting picked up with the Gore Warden to get dropped somewhere.
That's nice.
It uses its double. All of a sudden, the Gore Warden's T4. You move the Balefire in position to buff everybody else that got dropped off by another hero. There's ways to think. No Cry. I think it was Chrisner or Chrisling, one of the two Ks. Both great people, both great players. Then I apologize, I confuse your names all the time. Used a Gore Warden to take his wounded zombies, so they couldn't get the kill to get the points. Just picked them up and dropped them away. Threw somewhere else, picked it up, dropped it away. So they never got the kill on it. That's wild. That's a genius way of thinking of taking a warband like Soul Blight, putting something new in there and saying, I'm playing this way. I don't even have to res. You're going to sink all your dice into it, and then I'm just going to take it away. Nothing's achieved. I don't lose anything, and you don't gain anything. And that's far worse for you to not gain anything. And it's a
Sure.
play like that. Make these big brain plays. That's the only way you're going to ever test and get this done. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting there floundering and being like, well, I thought about when I was going to Adepticon, should I go out and buy like a big teeth list, like just a good stock list to give myself the best shot at winning? One, I don't own anything that great other than Iron Jaws. Like I was looking at it, I'm like, damn, I'm too much of a hipster with this game. That's not good. And two, I was like, but if I do that and I show up and I don't win with a list that I think is supposed to win, I'm
Yeah.
going to be so upset. I'm going to blow my own brain out of proportion right there. And I'm going to be like, but I was supposed to win. This is a really good list. So instead, I ended up like, you know what? I'm just going to take COS and show that they're completely viable. And that was my goal and intention. We get top 8, we get top 8. If we get higher, we do the deed, we're good. And that's where I was with that and making that decision too, which I thought was interesting in terms of what do I chase, the viability of power, or do I just chase what I know that I've sunk like 40 games in?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
I'll take the 40 games over, something, and then that's it.
We've been talking for a while now, so shall we round things off then? I think so. From my point of view, just because something is not the best and it cannot necessarily beat the ultimate top tier of super constructed play, that doesn't mean that you can't have a good time with them, with your models. And it doesn't mean that they will lose every single game. What it means is that if you put in the time and you really enjoy playing a faction and you love to play that faction, regardless if they win or lose, you will see those results anyway. Because, like we said, player skill, it's a massive thing. And ultimately, if you're going there and you're having a good time and you know what you're doing and you have reasonable expectations for the stuff that you're bringing, you'll get it. You'll win your 2 out of 4 games. You'll win 3 out of 4 games. It's definitely possible. Even if you're bringing a top tier faction, there's no guarantee that you're going to win all your games anyway, right? You could totally bomb and you could come bottom of the pack. So for me, it's better to bring something that I like the look of and that I think is super cool than to bring something that statistically is the best that I won't necessarily have a good time with or just know what I'm doing.
Even more the marriage of the two ideas of finding pieces that are statistically good and then finding what you want to play and combining the two, having that balanced approach is going to create a lot of success for you too. You're taking something weaker and that, but maybe we put something in stronger, like in Annie Prime into Daughters of Cain. All of a sudden we got a big beef body that's statistically in a known reliability and something that's not. And then we can merge the two ideas and make something beautiful out of it, as opposed to, only playing one or the other way. I think that balance and the repetition and keeping expectations, just like you said, honest and realistic, is another good one too. And I think that's completely correct. I agree with that.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So yeah, that's it. That is it from us for today. Thank you very much for watching. Rob, if you got anything you want to plug?
Just go and come check us out at 3 Heroes 1 Chaff, man. Got some good insights. We got a lot of basic builders, like learning how to play one box bespokes for newer players. We're filming some other stuff. We always do like a big pod once a month, and we have a bunch of other stuff. And come play in TTS League. Off Meta's playing there. I'm playing there. We have like casual, we have competitive. Come find us on the Discord.
Yeah, good stuff. I'll put all the links for that down below so you guys can check it out. As always, if you like what you see, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know down in the comment section below what you thought about what we had to say today. If you have some interesting builds, this is something I'm always looking out for. If you've got some interesting builds for lesser known warbands or lesser played warbands, slap them down in the comments. That's stuff that I like to see. Like I said, I want to be surprised. I want to see interesting things. Thank you very much for joining me, Rob.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff, good stuff. I've been Itan. This has been Off Beds Musings, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Take care.